Hey, by the way, real quick also on Fletcher. Um, Fletcher Cox is going to be so important this year. He is going to be so important to that football team. In the development of Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter. I think that Fletcher Cox has a chance to solidify himself as one of the best teammates in Eagle history. You're going to have two young. When's the last time we've seen so much youth at defensive tackle in Philly? When's the last time you saw this much youth? When Corey Simon was playing? When's the last time you saw this youth? Two defensive tackles you've taken in back-to-back drafts, 20 and 21 years of age. You got to have the youngest group in the entire league. Okay? You got to have it. And then you got a wily veteran in there who is a potential Hall of Fame candidate. Fletcher's going to be so important. Tracy Rocker is going to be so important. Would you bring Ndamukong Suh back? See what Sue said? I'm not going to training camp. Would you bring him back in September? Ndamukong Suh doesn't need training camp or OTAs or veteran mini camps. He doesn't need those things. You could bring his ass in September and you're good with it. Shit, you brought him in last year halfway through and he was great. Do you need a little bit more experience to help these young guys out? Brandon Graham's going to be in the conversation. Brandon Graham's more of an edge guy. He's going to be dealing more with, I think, with Nolan Smith. Okay? Yeah, I think he's going to be dealing with Nolan Smith more. Fletcher's going to be dealing with two dudes. One has a problem with his eating. The other guy has a problem, period. That's what they say. Fletcher's going to have to kind of be a babysitter. I wonder if the organization has told him that. Or if Fletcher already knows that. Probably the $10 million already makes him know that. I'm going to bring this up with Merrill. Because, the kind of guy Fletcher is, Fletcher Cox, in my opinion, it's just what Howie has done so much in the offseason here. This is another one of those T's being crossed and the I's being dotted. And how the $10 million makes sense. $10 million for Fletcher Cox. Tone, I told Tone this before. I'm not paying that guy $10 million. Now, shit, he's underpaid. He's underpaid almost. Because he's got quite a task at hand. He's got to play a lot of snaps. He's got to show these guys the ropes. He's got to be open to having people. Get this. You know what Fletcher Cox has to be this year? Which is so sacrilegious in an NFL locker room. He's got to be open to those guys taking his job. Do you know how crazy that is? You don't help the guy behind you because you're worried about making your money. But you have a guy now that the organization is paying you $10 million. The organization is hoping that those two young guys beat him out. What a great environment to be in if you're Jalen Carter and Fletcher Cox and you're Jordan Davis. Okay? Great environment. It's the passing of the baton. It's creating the environment that you guys talk about. Kyle says that Sue said that Hurts is the toughest or hardest quarterback he has forced in the league. Okay, I'm telling you, man, I'd like to have Ndamukong Suh back. I think Linval Joseph really had a good year last year stopping the run, but I think Suh could bring a lot to the table, especially with a guy because if you think about it, the best defensive tackle at that size to come out of college with Jalen Carter's type of potential has been Ndamukong Suh when he came out of Nebraska. Okay? It's like Ndamukong Suh. So to me, I think he is going to be so instrumental in how important it's going to be when it comes to putting that football team together. All right. Before we get Merrill Reese on, he's at the bottom of the hour here. I also want to throw this at you too, because I'm gonna bring that up with Merrill there about Fletcher Cox here. So who do we give credit to? Who would you give credit to fixing Hassan Reddick? Two teams failed. Two teams failed. Arizona, Carolina. Who gets credit for figuring out the Rubik's Cube? Is it Jonathan Gannon? Is it Sirianni? Is it Howie? Fixing Hassan Reddick? Was he broken in the first place? Yeah. 3 different teams in 3 different years? Since when do pass rushers get released? Don't you find that Tanner to be a problem? He's not a good tackler, and he can't cover. He's not a complete ball player. What do you mean, fixed? When it comes to putting people on the ground and tackling someone, he's not high on my list. He's not high on my list, my friend. And covering linebackers or covering tight ends and backs out of the backfield, he's terrible at it. Okay? He's terrible at it. And the Eagles were his 3rd team in 3 years. You tell me if you think there's a problem. Did the field affect the pass rush or just beat? Maybe the shoes they wore? Could have been. I've worn shitty shoes before on fields. But didn't they play on that same field earlier? Izzy, right? Well, wait a minute. That was supposedly was a new surface, right? Compared to what they had earlier in the year. Tanner, thank you. Taylor, I'm not hollering. I'm just saying, it was his 3rd team in 3 years. Personally now, Tanner, I look at the other 2 teams going, now I know why Arizona and Carolina suck. Okay, now I know why Carolina and Arizona suck because they couldn't figure out how to use good players. So, to me, I think that narrative has completely changed. Izzy, I hate using off-ramps like that, but look, man, I've gone to a football field before, like Legion Field. I went to Legion Field, and some of the places back in the day, they used to have AstroTurf. And it was so slippery with some of the shoes. I just wore sneakers one day. I had the best footing on the planet compared to everybody else on my team. Everyone else was slipping. So footwear has a lot to do with that. They had played on a surface earlier in the year in Arizona. I don't think it was the same. I thought it was a terrible field. It reminded me a little bit of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's got one of the worst fields on the planet. And shoes do matter. I thought that Kansas City didn't have a problem with it. They both play on the same field. So I would say that, again, it could have been an equipment issue that could have helped them more if they had better footing. Probably. I didn't think the field was the best light for the National Football League, to say the least. Okay? Well, that's on the old coaches for not figuring out Reddick's strength and how to use them. I just said that. That's correct. Organizationally. But to me, I give Howie credit. I don't give Jonathan Gannon credit. I give Howie credit. Because how did Howie turn him into the defensive candidate for the Defensive Player of the Year this year? You know how he did it? He brought 2 D tackles in. They stopped the run. Once they started doing a better job of stopping the run, what happened? His numbers started to increase, and his impact on the game began to increase more. That's why it's going to be so important to have Hassan Reddick again out there on the perimeter, and it's going to be so important to make sure your defensive tackles this year do just as effective of a job. If they don't do the job that they did last year, Reddick will not have the same year. They won't. They'll just run the ball on the Eagles. Teams are going to attack the Philadelphia Eagles in the early part of the season up the middle. they're going to attack them on the middle because your linebacking core and your safeties, and they're going to attack you with tight ends. If you're Sean Desai and you're Matt Patricia, I'd be expecting teams to run the ball on me. Last 2 years they have. This past season, they did a better job on first down. The year before that, they were terrible. One of the worst first down teams going. So to me, I think personally, it's going to be it's going to be interesting to see how teams attack the Eagle defense early on when it comes to the first part of the season because of the new faces that are in the room.